Okay, so in this series of videos, we are going to go over the process of atoms becoming ions and how we can use the periodic table to predict that, and then also see how that's going to affect the ability of compounds to form. So let's look at the difference between atoms and ions. We know that atoms have in them protons and electrons, and that protons are positive and that electrons are negative. And we can remember from a couple days ago that in an atom, the number of protons and the number of electrons have to be the same in order to balance out the charge. You might remember from the video that the new boys and not the new boys, the pros and the elected ones try to keep themselves equal. But what happens when the proton and electron numbers get out of balance? And when that happens, we call it an ion. And so what happens to the electrons and what happens to the protons? Why don't you pause for a second here and think about that, and then we'll come back and talk about it. Okay, so in an atom, the number of protons determines which atom it is, which element it is. If it's carbon, it has 6 protons, and it has 6 electrons. But if something like carbon were to become an ion, it would do that by losing or gaining electrons. So the electron number can change in the process of going from being an atom to being an ion, and that in fact is what makes a single atom become a monatomic ion, is the change in the number of electrons. So let's look at some of these, some examples. So if an atom loses 1 or more electrons, then it becomes because it's losing a negative, becomes positive, and a positive ion is called a cation. Please notice that the word is cat and ion. It looks like it might be something else, but it's cation. So here's an example. If we have sodium, which tends to lose 1 electron, so if I have a sodium atom and something happens that takes an electron away, now this just doesn't just happen, something has to happen to it to take an electron away, so sodium minus 1 electron becomes the sodium plus 1 ion. Now I write it this way because there's just a tradition that says you write it the plus sign behind. It's not going to matter if you want to put it in front, I don't care. Another way of writing this is we can just switch it around. So if I have a sodium atom, it becomes a sodium ion, and I have an extra electron then that's free to go and do something else. Now, something will have probably taken it away, so it's not just like hanging around. So let's consider something else. Sodium becomes sodium ion, but some other things can lose up to 3 electrons. Take aluminum, for example. Aluminum loses 3 electrons and becomes the aluminum plus 3 ion, or 3 plus ion. Okay, so if you lose an electron, you become plus 1. If you lose 2, you become plus 2. If you lose 3, you become plus 3. So that pattern's easy to see. One more thing about this, and then we'll go on to negatives in the next video. If we're going to name a cation, they are very simple to name. I've already said them. You just name the element, and you say ion after it. So it's the sodium ion or the aluminum ion. Okay, in the next video, we will look at what happens when things gain electrons.